Now, one thing where my Lions fandom isn't showing through, and I kind of want to switch gears once again, and this is probably going to set some of you off, all right? Because this is a topic that like I've been skirting around and I've been trying to figure out how to address because listen, I like you guys and I feel like you guys like me, and I don't want to say anything that pisses you guys off. But at the same time, this is a safe space. This is a place where I like to be honest with you guys, and I like to give my honest opinions on certain things. But there is a topic that's been going around since last year that I finally want to dive into, and I want to give my honest opinion on. And it's in regards to our guy Amon-Ra St. Brown, and whether or not he is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Now, I want to go back up. I think it was Super Saiyan Lion who pointed this out. Um, Top 100 list, top list, there's a certain level of bias in them. And so if you are sitting here in this chat and you are sitting here saying Amon-Ra St. Brown to you is a top 10 wide receiver, listen, I'm not going to call you crazy. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to, depending on where you have him in your top 10, maybe, but I'm not going to say anything crazy and I'm not going to call your list stupid. I will say this right now, right here, and it's definitive. You can crucify me if you want to. In my mind, Amon-Ra St. Brown is not a top 10 wide receiver. I think he is closing in on it. I think he could be there as soon as this upcoming year, as far as having another really good year, having another 1,000-yard season. He could definitely start to get into the conversation, but he is not a top 10 wide receiver. He's a top 15 wide receiver. I would even probably argue that he may be even like top, like he may end up even being like 13, 12 on my list if I was really listing them out. But I think the thing that we have to understand, or at least this is how I frame it. I'm not even gonna say you have to understand because you don't. Your list is your list. My guy Super Saiyan Lion saying, hell yeah, he is. Listen, if that's how you feel, bro, I'm not even gonna argue with you. I ain't gonna say that listen, that's how you feel about him, that's how you feel about him. I think obviously for you, for us as Lions fans, right? Amon-Ra is a number one wide receiver for us. But when I start to look at the NFL and when I start to break down a top 10 list, the first five are easy. And so there's not much of a conversation of is he in the top five? He's not, right? The top five to me are very cut and dry, and I won't put them in any order. But when you have Chase, Jefferson, Adams, uh, Diggs, and Tyreek Hill, like that five kind of speaks for itself. Then you go into the likes of AJ Brown, you go into the likes of CD Lamb, you have um, Terry McLaurin, you have um Jalen Waddle. Like there you start to kind of Cooper Cup. I get, and again, if you're looking at last season, I can see why you would be like, hey, Cooper Cup doesn't deserve to be on that list. But when Cooper Cup is healthy, Cooper Cup is in this list. Debo Samuel is in this list. You I start to get further and further, and I start to get closer and closer to 10, and I'm starting to find it hard to put Amon-Ra in there outside of just simply saying, like, hey, I'm a fan of this team, and I think he should be a top 10 wide receiver. But if I'm being objective, I think Saint is a top 15 wide receiver, and I think he's climbing. I think we all know and understand where he should be and how he should be discussed when talking about his draft class, right? Because his draft class gets talked about with Chase, Waddle, Smith, and then like they kind of stop there. But like Amon-Ra St. Brown is very much in that conversation and needs to be mentioned every time that draft class is discussed when talking about top wide receivers. Um, but when looking at the entirety of the NFL, I just look at Saint as like somebody who still needs to add some things to his game. And the thing that I love about him is I think he's well aware of it too. And I think the things that we've been hearing him say this offseason about again wanting to be utilized more as a deep threat and wanting to do more, working on the outside and things like that. To me, those are the things that will help Amon-Ra go from being in the, being a top 15 wide receiver to being a legitimate top 10 wide receiver. He currently in the current form that he has, listen, the man is nearly unguardable. He's a given bucket when it comes down to just attacking the middle of the field, right? Him, Cooper Cup, Debo Samuel are probably like your only like true like guys where it's like, yo, you line them up in the slot and you just know they're gonna get open. You just know they're gonna get yardage. the limitations to his game, and I don't even think it's necessarily a limitation to his game because he did it at USC, but the limitation to the way the offense runs is that he doesn't get put on the outside a lot. So we don't know, and we don't get to see again that level of dominance and see if that dominance translates to outside routes enough for him. Um Really quick before I kind of continue on this rant, because I do want to, I see a lot of you guys throwing in comments here, so I want to see where everybody's at with, again, my take. Do you agree or not? Uh Headers House 710 saying, to me, he's top 15. I agree. Uh Blue and Silver, appreciate you looking into the Rashawn Slater thing, saying you're right. He plays left tackle. He must have been thinking of his college position. Like I said, I think he played right. Rashawn Slater, I believe he played right tackle in uh at Northwestern, but I think he transferred over to left once he got to the NFL. Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying, I will say he's not better than Cooper Cup. I don't know who started that crazy ish. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a level of this where I start to kind of just feel like, listen, man, I love the guy too. I love the way he plays the position. I love the mentality he has. I love the chip on his shoulder. I just cannot, in good conscience, looking at the NFL, looking at the NFL landscape and being like, yeah, that's a top 10 wide receiver, when top 10s are hard, man. And at some positions it's harder than others. Wide receiver, to me, it's one of the hardest positions to find 10 and say this is the best 10, because there's a level of bias that comes into it. There's a level of bias in it even with my own list. Um because I still like the big bodied wide receivers, right? So Amon-Ra being a little bit smaller doesn't quite make my list in the top 10, just because like there's guys like CD Lamb and there's guys like AJ Brown, there's guys like DK Metcalf that it's like, yo, I kind of like those style of receivers better. And those types of receivers have also made improvements to their game, right? DK Metcalf used to be a guy that could only run like, 9 routes and post routes, and now he's starting to be able to run some of these more nuanced routes that require better footwork. Um, but let me get back in the chat. Miles here saying the fact that a slot receiver is even in the conversation for top 10 shows you how special he is. Absolutely. And I think if we were talking about, again, who's the best slot receiver in the NFL, there would be a very good claim that Amon-Ra would have there. I think it'd probably be between him and Cooper Cup, but I probably would give it to Saint because I think Saint plays in the slot more than Cooper Cup does. But that would be the conversation right there. Um, Debt Fan Man saying Amon-Ra St. Brown becomes top 10 when he supplants Cooper Cup. Listen, and I don't think it's just Cooper Cup. Like I said, I think there's a lot of other guys on that list. I don't think a lot of people talk about Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin has been just doing his thing in Washington since he got drafted, right? But again, it's a similar situation with like when players play in Detroit. When your team's not winning, no one really talks about you. But when you go look at, Terry McLaurin's numbers, he's been doing work literally since the day he got drafted, and he's only gotten better year in and year out. Um Lester White saying JMO has the physical gifts to possibly be a top 10 in time. But as much as we love St. Brown, he's helped more than anyone by the scheme, not dominant. And I don't listen, and I do think he's helped by the scheme, but I do think there's a level of dominance to it. Like the dude is just guaranteed yardage in the middle. And if you don't, and because he plays in the slot and because it's really hard to double there and everything like that, he does an amazing job at what he does. He doesn't drop a lot of passes. And so I don't want to diminish the level of dominance he shows there, but I think, well, again, when we're talking about complete wide receivers and we're talking about top tens, things get real cutthroat in that situation, because there's a lot of really good receivers and there's a lot of receivers that are currently doing things that Saints just not doing. And again, I don't know if it's because he can't do them. I think it might just be because he's not asked to do them.